So hopefully you've got in your classroom 2 solid uninterrupted work cycles in the morning and the afternoon. But then you do have lunch and recess usually to contend with. So these are other systems that you really need to give time and thought to in how you're going to have children transition from work to lunch, lunch to recess, recess back to the classroom. That's a lot of transitions of the whole class in a relatively short period of time. Also, I really encourage you to take lunch as an opportunity for community building. In our busy society, lunch is sometimes the only time children are sitting down with other human beings and sharing a meal. You know, if you have 3 kids in soccer, dinner is often, in the back of the minivan. If your parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, it's not often that the family can sit down together and eat. There's any number of reasons our children are not able to sit and have family meals. And so lunch might be the one time in a day that they have that opportunity. So I very much encourage you to build a strong community around the sharing of that meal. It's a powerful daily ritual that you can have together, and sharing meals is really a defining characteristic of humanity. No other animal sits and eats together or bares their teeth to one another. So this is distinctly human and can be a really important ritual in our classrooms. So that being said, think through how you can do this in your classroom on a daily basis. How do you transition to lunch? How do you set up for lunch? What are the rules around lunch? And then that transition to recess. So I'm going to talk you through the procedure I used and really liked in my classroom, just to help you think about how you could do some of this in your own classroom. Of course, it's going to have to be specific to your school culture, your classroom culture, all of that. But I really took time to make lunchtime a ritual in my classroom. Because of that, at the beginning of the year, when the children are learning so many other systems, we did not do my lunchtime ritual. We would take picnic lunches outside and eat out of our lunch boxes. We'd gather in a circle and eat together. And if the weather was bad, we'd have a picnic lunch on the floor of the classroom. But once I felt like the class was ready and to handle the layers of systems involved in my lunch process, I'd introduce it, and I'd plan extra time for it. So that we could really build it up. And in my classroom, the children used placemats and napkins and real plates and glasses and silverware. So one thing they had to do to, transition, they had to clean up from the work period in the morning. We ate in our classroom. So they had to transition to lunch. They had to wash their hands, get their placemat, napkin, and all the dishes they need and put them at their spot where they were eating lunch. Okay, so just imagine all that transition. They had to take lunch out of their containers and put it onto the plate. So we want to be sure that there was time for that to be done, so that lunch boxes then go on the floor next to them when they're ready to eat. And if they're sitting at a table of 4 people, they have to wait till everyone's set up before they eat. That's just polite. So that's another aspect to consider. How do you help them build that respect and control of the will to sit together and be ready to eat all together? Then they can eat. And they ended up being about 20 minutes that they had time to eat. And I made it very clear that no one would be dismissed early if they slammed their lunch in 90 seconds. This is 20 minutes that we really get to spend time together. So eat as quickly or as slowly as you want to, but you're still going to be sitting there having a lovely conversation with your peers. I also had a general sort of classroom rule that you're going to eat about half of your lunch. And I only instituted this rule after I had one child who hadn't eaten her lunch, hadn't eaten breakfast or dinner the night before, unknown to me, and passed out in my classroom in the middle of the afternoon. So then I decided I should pay a little more attention to their food intake. So generally eat about half your lunch. I'd give a 5-minute warning before cleanup and just point out, like, if you haven't eaten because you've been talking this whole time, now's the time to focus on eating giving your body some fuel so that you can head out to recess. Then we transition into the cleanup. And that's, a procedure, especially with all the plates and dishes and things you have to think about. So we would, every child would clean up their own plates, put them on the dirty dish cart to be rolled into the office where the dishwasher was. So think through all of those procedures. When we got this down really well, we could set up, eat lunch, and clean up in about 45 minutes. When we first started, it took much longer. I scheduled at least an hour or more to be sure we had time to learn all those systems and make them run efficiently. And then they had to change their shoes to put on their outdoor shoes to get ready to go outside. So think through, how can you do this in your classroom? What makes sense for your classroom culture, and what's going to support strong community throughout the lunchtime experience? If you are at a school where they go to a lunchroom, start to think about what impact you can have on that lunchroom experience. I remember my lunchroom experiences from my childhood, and it was the two ladies that also monitored the playground for recess. They monitored the lunchroom with whistles and everything. It was chaotic and stressful and overwhelming. I hope that you could work to build a culture at your school that will allow for some grace and courtesy in the lunchtime experience. It's just such an opportunity. Then the same thing as you think about transitioning to recess and what the recess expectations are. Recess was often my break time, but in the first few weeks of school, I went to recess. I just went without a break because I wanted to help cultivate the culture that was going to serve the children so that they didn't come back from recess, sort of in chaos. So think about what you can do to support if you're not on recess duty. What is the culture that we're working toward at our school to support the children having this free outdoor time, but still being respectful and everyone feeling like they belong and they feel safe? So lunch and recess take some time for you to consider. It's going to be very dependent on your individual school culture and expectations, but also think about how it can still reflect your classroom culture when the children are eating and when they head outside to recess as well.